Your attention back to the stage. I am alerted to the fact that our guest speakers as well as dignitaries are now making their way into the room and to the stage. And so I'll just let them make their way to the stage because they will be seated behind me. Thank you very much. All right, while we wait, ladies and gentlemen, perhaps let me alert you to the fact that our conference today is a paperless one. And to those of you who haven't, please do download the app. There are a number of instructions that you will see on the screens to my left and to my right this morning. We do have Wi-Fi in the venue, and you will see the relevant passwords are on the screen. And the application will keep you up to date with what's happening over the next 3 days. It will allow you to comment and, most importantly, to connect with the various delegates, speakers, and your fellow guests who sit amongst you this morning. The application is called ICAO, and you'll see ICAO events. It is a blue application. Please specifically go to the events one on your Android and your Apple store. And perhaps while we wait a little further still, to those of you who need translation services, the team is already up and ready at the back and here to assist you and make sure that we are all part of the next 3 days' conversation. You will note on each of your desks that you have got the microphones as well as the ear sets. Please click through the channels until you find the language that is most relevant to you. The instructions around how we will manage questions and answers are also on the screens, and we will make sure that they are queued up as and when we open up for audience interaction. But if you are battling with tuning into the right frequency, particularly when speakers do then change from English to the other languages available to us this morning, please do try and cue me, but we certainly have a host of people in the room this morning who can help us with that. Thank you. All right, thank you very much to our protocol officers and our technical team. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. To our Deputy Minister of Transport, Ms. Sindisiwe Chikunga, the Secretary General of ICAO, Dr. Fang, the Chairman of the SACAA Board, Mr. Mokoena, the Director of Civil Aviation in South Africa, Ms. Khoza, the Interim Secretary General of the African Civil Aviation Commission, Mr. Papa Atoumane. I've got it right. Fantastic file, thank you. As well as the Director of UNESCO, Mr. Hubert Gijzen. I've got that right too. Captains of industry, as well as the skies, to our guests, our very honored guests this morning, the media, and the sponsors who make this possible. Good morning. My name is Lynette Nduli, and I'm quite literally your Chief of Staff on this flight that we are taking over the next 3 days at the very first Global Aviation Gender Summit, hosted very proudly by the South African Civil Aviation Authority, co-organized by ICAO in collaboration with UNESCO. The spirit of 1956 is very much alive in South Africa. So to our international guests, you've arrived right on time as we celebrate and we acknowledge the contributions to society, to business, to the economy, and all the different spheres of what makes a great nation like South Africa, that women have specifically played a role and a part in. I can only imagine that on a morning such as this, the women of 1956, without WhatsApp groups, without social media, without their high heels or their ruby woo, took to the streets of the of Pretoria to the Union buildings. And as we sit here, particularly as the women gathered here, and I'm so excited to see the young women who are gathered here this morning in their very bright pink hard hats, they took to those streets knowing full well that they were fighting for a destiny, a future, goals and ambitions that would outlive them. So as we sit here today, as leaders, as pioneers, as thought leaders and influencers in the spaces that we all come from in the world of aviation and business this morning, we can all acknowledge this. We are indeed our ancestors' wildest dreams come true. Aviation connects people, cultures, and businesses right the way across the world. And it strengthens so many dynamics in vibrant economies, societies, cultures, and for diverse groups worldwide. Every day, more than 100,000 flights take to our skies, and more than 10 million people at a time are ferried to their various destinations, to projects, to exciting new initiatives, meetings, and to be with their loved ones right the way around the world. This is an industry that is $18 billion strong as it carries goods and necessary air freights around the world today. This is also an industry that makes sure that directly more than 6 million people are employed and are able to create meaningful livelihoods for not just themselves, but their families and in the context of their communities. And they are also able to help us in the aviation industry contribute to not only regional as well as country gross domestic product, but also the global GDP. Air traffic as well as air freight traffic is expected to double by the year 2034. We all know that the rate and pace of innovation, disruption, and time means that 2034 is not the work of the next generation, but it is for each of us to already start doing the necessary work. And as this sector begins to grow, we know that sectors and innovation and disruption are only moved forward through the efforts and the very intentional actions of people. Now, you can't have a conversation about the future without including women. Women make up half the world's population, and therefore, if you are going to talk about the future, or the growth of an economy, or the growth of a sector, you also can't have half a conversation without women at that table. So as we gather here over the next 3 days, we are here to look at how do we attract women to the aviation industry? How do we keep women in the aviation industry? How do we make sure that women are not only powerful, but are influential in the agenda that the aviation industry can play in multiple disciplines, from resilience to competitiveness to global integration, as well as trade and economic factors? We are also here to make sure that the numbers of technically skilled women in this industry increase. Did you know that women only make up 6% of the world's pilots today? And this is a number that is way too low when we know that women use aviation each and every day for various reasons and can certainly take to the skies. Context, ladies and gentlemen, is our new currency. They say that in one part of the world, a dog is a man's best friend, and in another, he is his supper. And therefore, it's equally important for each of us as we sit here today to think back on what we do in our own personal spaces, in our institutional spaces, in our business spaces, about our compact with society. Not just from an environmental perspective, from a governance perspective, but also from a sustainability and a social perspective. And we can only do this if everyone comes with. So what does my social compact look like? My social compact specifically includes transformation, diversity, and inclusivity. And the 3 words for me: extend past the parameters of gender and race. They begin to take into account the transformational power of my experiences, of you and I's differences as we sit in a room such as this, the intentional actions that I can take to influence the gender agenda right in the work that I do, but also the awareness that taking everybody with is just the power that the world needs today to build strong, credible, and sustainable brands, businesses, institutions, governments, as well as projects that will take us well into the future. We cannot deny that women are the world's next superpower. So, the objectives of our summit today, as we look at gender and the role specifically of women in aviation, will be these. Let us advocate for the inclusion of women in decision-making, in strategic projects and interventions, and the day-to-day working of the aviation industry. Let us demonstrate decisive and strong leadership and let women lead from the front and from the sides, but perhaps most importantly, lead equally and with everybody who sits around the relevant deal tables. Let us mobilize each and every single member of the aviation industry, those who are with us in the room today, those who are in the offices we left behind, those who watch how this industry moves the world. Let us influence each and every one of them to help us shed the prejudices and the biases that keep women out, and let us invite them to help us lower the barriers of entry as well as access to women to this very, very exciting space. And as we leave here by Friday, let us each leave with concrete ideas, actions, and plans that won't make this just another gathering of women with great ideas, but will make this the very first and important stepping stone to making sure that the agenda of gender inclusivity in the aviation industry always stays top of mind at boardroom tables, in the C-suite, and in the corridors of the various aviation industrial organizations and policy passages right the way around the world. As we throw forward to what's in store, you've all got a program in your delegate bag. I've introduced you to our app today, and you will see that we not only have a fantastic lineup of speakers who have diverse interests, who have diverse industrial experiences and insights, but you will also see that we're going to be tackling some of the hard stuff. So as I watch our young ladies in the hard hats, I can see that they're already ready for the hard digging and the helmets that we are going to need to wear as we dismantle some of what was and we relearn a way to be and a context to be in with women in the aviation industry today. Gatherings of this nature are not possible without fantastic partners and sponsors. So this morning's panel in front of us are these partnerships and collaborations that we need to engage further. So we would like to thank all the relevant parties, the airlines, the different industry partners, the institutions that have gathered to make this agenda possible. And I certainly hope to see that they will carry this agenda well into the future past this inaugural event. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2018, I know that there is no need to ask you to switch off your phones, but I do know that there is a need for you to be part of writing a new narrative for women in the aviation industry. So, to those of you who are engaged on social media, I invite you to use our hashtag. The time is now. And as you speak to your audiences and shift their thoughts and influence their ideas, make sure that you share those with not just your audience, but also with those partners and the people of the world who follow you and are perhaps influenced by what you have to say, whether it's on LinkedIn or Facebook and Twitter, because the time is indeed now for women. Enough of me and my insights and overview, and back to the panel behind me. I would at this point in time like to welcome to the podium and to the lectern behind me, Ms. Khoza, who is the Director of Civil Aviation for the South African Civil Aviation Authority. Please give her a very warm welcome to the stage.
Thank you, Program Director, Ms. Lynette Ntuli. Please allow me to first acknowledge the presence of the Deputy Minister of Transport, Honorable Ms. Sindisiwe Chikunga, the Secretary General of the International Civil Aviation Organization, Dr. Fang, the ICAO Deputy Regional Director, Mr. Ndikumana, the Interim Secretary General of the African Civil Aviation Commission, Mr. Atoumane, the senior officials from various UN agencies, including UNESCO, UN Women, as well as the World Bank, the representatives of various professional associations and non-profit organizations, the Acting Associate Assistant Deputy Minister from Transport Canada, the board members and the Chairperson of the South African Civil Aviation Authority, Mr. Smunda, Mokoena, the board members from various state-owned entities, including Airports Company South Africa, Air Traffic and Navigation Services, distinguished representatives, director generals from various states, executives from various civil aviation organizations, permanent representatives of states to the ICAO Council, the CEOs and executives from various organizations and entities, distinguished speakers, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. I am indeed delighted and honored to be welcoming you today. Standing here, I wish to acknowledge your presence and also convey gratitude to you for being part of this critical event that is sure to change the future of women in aviation across the world. So, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to say it in isiZulu, that siyanamukela eMzansi Africa, meaning we welcome you to our beautiful homestead, South Africa. Let me begin by extending gratitude to the Minister of Transport in absentia, extend the gratitude to our Deputy Minister of Transport, who is the first female Deputy Minister of Transport in South Africa, a leader, an aviator by passion, and a patron of women empowerment. I refer to Ms. Sindisiwe Chikunga. And of course, I wish to also acknowledge the senior officials from the Department of Transport, as well as the Ministry of Transport, and to thank them for putting their support behind this summit. Your leadership, ma'am, Deputy Minister, is something to marvel at. To the South African Civil Aviation Authority Board of Directors, thank you for supporting this event and for giving us support as demonstrated by your full presence today. I would also like to convey appreciation to ICAO, which is an agency which is led by a woman Secretary General, Dr. Fang, who is a very able and competent leader, and together with a dedicated team of professionals for acknowledging the need for this conversation and for embracing this process and cooperating with us to mobilize resources that made this day a reality. We also appreciate the collaboration received from UNESCO and UN Women. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to also acknowledge the valuable contribution of the various sponsors, especially our platinum sponsors, that is South African Airways and Transport Canada. We thank you for your generous contribution. Program Director, allow me to reiterate that the lack of gender equality and the tendency to overlook women have long passed their respective due dates. The time to chart a new flight path that will bring about genuine gender transformation and equality in aviation is now. If we don't pursue change, then it means that we endorse the perpetuation of injustice against the next generation of female aviators. It would mean that we accept the status quo as it is today and do not want to take the responsibility of removing man-made obstacles to gender equality for many young girls across the world that are keen on becoming successful aviators. The time to start walking the talk in terms of equal opportunity in aviation is now. I will not be long because I do know that immediately after this welcoming note, our Deputy Minister has to, in fact, fly back to Johannesburg, where there is a very important meeting, Cabinet Lekgotla, for South Africans who will understand. And therefore, I will not read everything that is prepared. Safe to say, once again, you are welcome to South Africa, and I do trust that we will have fruitful deliberations over the next 2.5 days. I thank you.
Thank you very much to the Director of Civil Aviation in South Africa, Ms. Khoza, for that welcome. If I can at this time call to the stage the Honorable Deputy Minister of Transport in South Africa, and how special it is, Ms. Chikunga, that you are a woman and you are here to lead us as we begin this maiden voyage in our program. I would like to make a slight change to our program, so if you don't mind, just in essence of the time that she has to leave, but I know that you would like to welcome her to the stage. So if you can please come up to the chairman of the South African Civil Aviation Authority, Mr. Mokoena. He will do the official welcome of the Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Program Director. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As indicated by the acceleration that the Program Director, we are very short on time. But ladies and gentlemen, my duty is to introduce the Deputy Minister to the stage. But let me first of all recognize the Director of Civil Aviation at SACAA, Ms. Khoza, recognize Mr. Gijzen from UNESCO and Mr. Fall from AFCAC. I think in South Africa we are honored, particularly the current board at SACAA, that in the past 4 years we have managed to interact directly on the South African soil with the Secretary General of ICAO. Dr. Fang, you're welcome again. We really appreciate that. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's no brainer for us that some 62 years ago, very brave women marched to the Union building in protest against the extension of past laws. And tomorrow that will mark the 62nd year of that event. But that event has passed on its culture to some of our women leaders. And such leader is the person that's going to give us a welcome and a keynote address. Her professional career, she's qualified nurse. She has a diploma in midwifery and nursing. She's got a BA honors and a master's in nursing, and she's currently studying politics. In terms of his contribution to the ruling party, the African National Congress, she has crisscrossed almost all the arms of the African National Congress, from the branch level, region, provincial, and now the National Executive Committee, to which she was elected into at the 55th Congress in December. She became a member of parliament some 10 years ago, and she has served on a number of portfolio committees in parliament, including those of police, correctional services, budget, housing, and defense. And of course, as we all know, the Deputy Minister was appointed the Deputy Minister of Transport in 2012. Please, ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcome the Deputy Minister of Transport, Ms. Sindisiwe Chikunga. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Program Director. The Secretary General of ICAO, Dr. Fang, ICAO Deputy Regional Director, Mr. Atoumane, Interim SG of AFCAC, Mr. Papa Atoumane, senior officials from various UN agencies, including ICAO, UNESCO, UN Women, World Bank, permanent representatives of state to the ICAO, of course, including our own Mr. Pierre, Acting Deputy Director General for Aviation Branch in the Department of Transport, Ms. Gigi Pewa, chairpersons and members of boards of transport entities, particularly Chairperson of SACAA Board, Mr. Mokoena, CEOs of transport state-owned companies, including those in the aviation sector. First, Ms. Khoza of SACAA, Mr. Mtiane of ATNS, Mr. Bongan Maseko of AXA, senior management of the Department of Transport, senior management of our transport entities, representatives of governments, NGOs, and aviation industry, delegates, esteemed guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor and indeed a privilege for me to address this very auspicious inaugural Global Gender Aviation Summit. On behalf of the South African government and the people of South Africa, I wish to welcome all members of the United Nations and the ICAO present here, representatives of governments, representatives of, presenters of papers, delegates and guests that have graced our shores. We wish to specifically thank the Secretary General of ICAO for gracing this occasion even under her most demanding work, and we believe that this summit will be a worthy experience. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, we as Africans are very proud to have a Secretary General of Dr. Fang caliber, who as soon as she had been elected, chose Africa as her first mission, where she met with South Africa's Dr. Khoza Zuma, then Chairperson of the African Union. Together with the Chairperson of the African Union, they signed a pledge for the development of civil aviation in Africa. We welcome the Secretary General with our warmest arms in this year of Mama Sisulu and in this month of the woman in South Africa. South Africa will always be in support of ICAO's gender equality program. More so, we are also driven by ICAO's recent reiteration of its commitment to gender equality and the development of women. This year, as a country, we are commemorating the centenary of Dr. Nelson Mandela and Mayor Albertina Sisulu, the stalwarts of the liberation struggle who would have turned 100 years old had they lived. Mama Sisulu was one of the leaders of the 20,000 women who marched to the Union Building in Pretoria on the 9th of August 1956 to protest against the proposed amendment to the Urban Areas Act on carrying of passes. Following the success of the march, the Congress Alliance decided that the 9th of August would henceforth be celebrated as Women's Day. And it is now in South Africa commemorated each year as a national holiday, and August month was declared as by our government as the Women's Month. We are quite pleased to see so many aviation experts from all walks of aviation sphere who spent grueling hours preparing for their presentations so that we leave this summit with enough food for thought and concrete decisions. It will be even more pleasing to learn if more of the delegates at this summit are young and that we are committing to ICAO's program of next generation professionals. This obviously has implications for our growing young bulge in many parts of the world. We believe that this summit will open up our eyes to the hanging opportunities that the world presents to us, and that we shall all join hands to attack the glaring challenges of poverty and inequality that are faced by peoples of the world in general, especially women. I believe that nothing can defeat an idea whose time has come. The summit sits in the middle of a fast-changing world. Our freedoms we have inherited are exercised within a world with very diverse international dynamics and at times regressive dynamics. Innovations in different elements of transportation are coinciding with and also led by the fourth industrial revolution that eases problem solving and increases access to information and knowledge generation. These are more pronounced in aviation. While our world continues to shrink as a result of positive globalization and benefits it offers, we are, however, also experiencing widening gaps brought about by the emerging geopolitics that might exacerbate conflict, poverty, and destitution. This geopolitics expresses itself through pockets of protectionism and threats to free trade among nations of the world. This global context is also characterized by new dynamics that affect immigration and the movement of human factors across borders. This will certainly have implications for young professionals aviators seeking international placement. This summit also convenes as the whole globe undergoes change just as much as our climate conditions are changing and threatening billions of lives worldwide. Ladies and gentlemen, this summit sits when a great number of African countries are transforming their political conditions for the better, with greater stability and progress in the offering. This is accompanied by the positively exciting environment that is being carved for an integrated Africa through the newly declared African Continental Free Trade Agreement. This is likely to produce unparalleled benefits for trade, cultural exchanges, and broadly positive people-to-people connections for the rest of the African continent. That is positive people-to-people connections to the rest of the African continent. We have witnessed the formal adoption of the Single African Air Transport Market, SACAA, in 2015, and its launch in January 2018 as a flagship project for Agenda 2063 of the African Union in support of continental integration. South Africa was one of the first 11 countries to sign the agreement under the leadership of Dr. Nkosazana Zuma, who was then chairperson of the African Union. The list of countries stand now at 26. According to African Union, the Single African Air Transport Market is an initiative to create a single unified air transport market in Africa, the liberalization of civil aviation in Africa, and serve as an impetus to the continent's economic integration agenda. It is for this reason that we urge other African states that have not signed to sign the SACAA. It is hoped that the latter, that is the liberalization of civil aviation in Africa, will happen through the implementation of the Yamoussoukro decision and in turn improve air connectivity and lower fares by 25% across the continent, while ensuring sustainable development of air transport in the continent. Program Director, it must bear in mind that this development in the continent's civil aviation sphere will positively impact the economy and create jobs and, of course, integrated continent. It is equally important to point out in this regard that integration as is envisaged in civil aviation is also planned for other modes of transport, such as, of course, the maritime transport, rail, and road transport. What happens in other transport modes will always affect our thinking around the changes we need to implement in the aviation sector. The question to ask is whether such integration will create a broadly African approach to gender equality in the African transport sector. This indeed might be a question to be tackled by this summit. We believe that the resolutions of gender inequality in the civil aviation sector cannot be successfully carried out without cognizance and appreciation of broader developments happening in the transport sector in general. In South Africa and in the transport sector, we are dedicated to gender equality and the empowerment of women. And I agree with the words of ICAO that gender equality is both the right thing and the smart thing to do. Program Director, today we have been asked to speak at a summit whose aim is to find solutions to the challenges of gender inequality in the aviation sector. One cannot help it but consult the past in order to understand the present and, of course, plan for the future. With your permission, Program Director, I wish to track back very briefly and tell a very short history of aviation and the history of inequality in civil aviation in South Africa. Aviation honestly began in South Africa in 1913 when citizens were invited to join the South African Aviation Corps as officer aviators. According to the South African Power Flying Association, the then Union government did not have any training facilities, so it negotiated with the Partisan Aviation Syndicate for the training of military pilots. The school accepted 10 state-funded trainees. These were all white men. We are told that in addition, the school also accepted 3 private pupils, and there was thus 13 trainees. Out of the 13, one of these was South Africa's and Africa's first female pilot at the time, Anne-Maria Bokia Reli, who obtained her license in 1913. so effectively it was 10 men and 1 woman. The year 2013, therefore, saw the advent of aviation in South Africa, and at the same time marked the beginning of women's participation in the aviation industry in this country. I must also say that 2013 is the year in which the Land Act was promulgated. This law was instrumental in the economic and political deprivation and exclusion of black people in South Africa, and as such had impact in sectors such as transport in general and aviation in particular. Ladies and gentlemen, it will be clear that historically, careers and business involvement within the transport sector have been the preserve of males. It must also be noted that it has mainly been a preserve, of course, of white males to the exclusion of even white women, let alone black men and women who were always shut out by colonial racist policies. After 105 years of its existence, the South African aviation sector still tells a sad story of discrimination and exclusion based on racial and gender inequality. When and where transformation in terms of race and gender is taking place, it is either too slow or deliberately skewed. In South African aviation, in fact, in South African aviation is the industry, the South African aviation is the industry that practices gatekeeping due to the fact that aviation academies, many of them, are privately owned by men and truthfully white men. The following statistics will tell the story. As far as all aeroplanes pilots are concerned, including private pilots, commercial pilots, and air transport pilots, females account for 9.02% as opposed to 90.98% males. Females of all similar categories of helicopters are 9.94% as opposed to 90.06% males, and in all other categories. If we include cabin crew, the category other than pilots is represented by 48.40% females as opposed to 51.60 males, indicating that cabin crew is the only category fairly representative by females. Female airline transport pilots number 91.26% white females as opposed to 8.74% of African, Indian, and colored descent females. So government has had to intervene. A policy environment has been crafted by government to enable an inclusive transformation process for the transport sector. In view of this history, Program Director, it is no secret as to why we feel so strongly about gender issues and why gender equality is a founding principle set out in the country's constitution. The Gender Equality Bill passed in 2014 was introduced to accelerate the empowerment of women and attain 50-50 gender parity in the country. The Commission for Gender Equality is mandated to monitor, evaluate, and research women's rights and gender equality. And the Department of Women, headed by a minister, has been placed within the presidency in order to give women issues the most focused attention. Access to formal employment for women has been legislated through the Employment Equity Act of 1998, under which employers are required to work towards more equitable representation based on gender, race, and disability. The Act was amended for women to equalize wage and salaries between men and women for work of equal value. South Africa's National Development Plan has gender equality as an integrated theme. The NDP echoes the sentiments of ICAO's initiative on air transport gender equality, the commitment to enhancing gender equality by 2030, and Goal 5 of the United Nations Sustainable Development, which states, achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. The Transport Sector Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Charter sets empowerment and gender equity targets for the transport sector to achieve. There is implementation of a 50% target for women representation in board of directors in transport sector state-owned companies. Skills development program prioritize women education and training, we want to believe. Recruitment and selection prioritizes women, youth, and people with disabilities. And of course, an aviation transformation strategy which seeks to change the status quo and create access to previously disadvantaged groups in the aviation sector was adopted by Cabinet. The transport sector transformation strategy aims to fast-track the transformation and gender equality in the sector. 60% or more of bursaries are awarded to women in the sector, even by the Department of Transport, but of course the state-owned companies. We have conducted outreach programs at rural areas and encouraged youth to enter in science, engineering, and technology discipline to increase capacity in the transport sector with the aim to alleviate gender-based challenges in the aviation sector. And of course, this has happened even through the approval by Cabinet. A Transport Sector Transformation Committee has been established that facilitates the acceleration of transformation, in particular for women and people with disabilities. Given this scenario, it is clear that these efforts we have embarked upon must show results also in employment equity within the sector. However, we will learn that while government has taken this proactive stance to combat gender inequality and promote women empowerment, the transport sector, especially aviation, has remained a very stubborn area to transform. The question, ladies and gentlemen, is whether we have developed the best approaches and tools to resolve these stubborn challenges. We hope that this summit will help us find effective answers to these questions. With all this that we have highlighted, we hope that this summit will end with a declaration, I hope, but also believe that some decisions taken here may actually be presented as working papers at the next year ICAO Assembly. We believe it is time the Assembly discusses these gender issues. Taking into account that ICAO has a program, No Country Left Behind, we believe this could be formally extended so that no woman or women are left behind in the development of the aviation sector. We expect role players in the aviation sector, such as airlines, to come to the party and play an active part in the achievement of this aim. This summit tells us that a time has come. The skills and economic front must be responsive and dialogue must include the youth. It should be a deliberate effort, including the possibility to set aside, if possible, the UN fund to target marginalized women into skill set previously regarded as male-dominated, which aviation is #1 on the list. We also need IATA, which is in charge of setting standards for airlines, to come on board and regulate the implementation of gender parity. We know that more can be achieved, but the detail is certainly in partnerships that we must continue to build. There are tremendous gains in our mutual deliberations and actions. I therefore would like to encourage every speaker, dignitary, and delegate to work together to breathe life into this goal that we have greater gender equity in aviation. In order to achieve our lofty goals, we'll explore many facets of this journey, and today we will start by setting the scene and changing the narrative. I am indeed encouraged by the selected topics to be discussed. Nothing can defeat an idea whose time has come, and we believe that the time for gender equity in the aviation sector has come. I must thank the organizing team of this summit, have gifted us with the role of patron of the summit, it is indeed a great honor for the Minister of Transport. We must thank the team for choosing South Africa as the setting for this inaugural summit. It is indeed great respect for all the people of South Africa. I hope that you have the opportunity to taste some of the traditional South African hospitality, and that all of you will enjoy your brief visit to the beautiful South Africa and beautiful mother city, Cape Town. Just across the ocean, there is, of course, Robben Island. If possible, please visit it when time and circumstances shall permit. Program Director, it is indeed my pleasure and privilege to declare this Global Gender Aviation Summit officially opened, and I thank you.
Can you ask if she wants to leave now? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much to the Deputy Minister of Transport. As indicated a little bit earlier in our program, this is a very busy woman and a woman of national business today, so she is taking back to the skies to the province of Gauteng, where she is required. So we do thank her for her time this morning, as well as her contribution to the discussion around the history, as well as the current context that we have to deal with gender in the aviation, as well as the transport sector broadly in South Africa and beyond. As we continue with our program, I would also like to thank our chair of the South African Civil Aviation for welcoming the Deputy Minister this morning. Sir, you come from the world of energy in particular, but here you are this morning taking us to the skies and fueling women's participation and dreams into the sky. And we appreciate your presence as well as support to this program. As we continue now, ladies and gentlemen, I have again the privilege of welcoming to the stage, this is brilliant, hey, of welcoming a brilliant woman to the stage again, Ms. Fang, who is the Secretary General of ICAO. Ms. Liu has an illustrious career track record in aviation in particular, and she's the very first female Secretary General of this organization. And she's not only tasked with transforming processes and administration and the relevant issues related to policy and governance, but also transforming how this industry responds to what the future needs now and what the future needs next. And being a woman, no doubt, gender is right at the top of her agenda. She has led in different roles at different institutions and organizations, and perhaps most pointedly has acted in the past as the chief negotiator for the Chinese government for bilateral as well as multilateral transport agreements with various foreign countries and entities. I not only look forward to her contribution to this conference, but I look forward to some of the very intentional steps, strategies, and programs she is going to bring to us through ICAO and the seat that she occupies. Please give her a very warm welcome to the podium.
Thank you for kind introduction. Directors Generals of Civil Aviation Authorities, representatives on the ICAO Council, representatives of the government of South Africa, representatives of the United Nations Women, UNESCO, and other international and regional organizations, representatives of industries, distinguished guests, and delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. As a woman who has spent virtually her entire career in the service of international civil aviation, This is truly an exciting moment for me to witness this first ever Global Aviation Gender Summit. I would first of all like to congratulate the Honorable Minister of Transport for South Africa, Dr. Bonginkosi Emmanuel Zimat, Deputy Minister of Transport, Ms. Sindisiwe Chikunga, the Director General of the South Africa Civil Aviation Authority, SACAA, Ms. Poppy Khoza, Interim Board Chairman of SACAA, Ms. Smunda Mokoena, for jointly supporting ICAO's hosting of this inaugural summit in the beautiful city of Cape Town. All of the support and excellent facilities you have provided for us are highly appreciated. We should also recognize together that through this hosting of this summit, South Africa has now positioned itself as a true front-runner on gender. Your state has very clearly and concretely demonstrated its firm commitment to the advancement of women in aviation through its support, and for that we all salute you. I was also deeply appreciative that SACAA and ICAO have enjoyed such close collaboration in organizing this summit from the United Nations Education, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, not to mention the technical guidance we received from our colleagues at UN Women. And let me please not leave out my good friend, Ms. Angela Gittens, the Director General of Airports Council International, ACI, who is an inspiring woman herself and who has also devoted some of ACI's resources toward helping make this first summit a great success. The result of all of these efforts is therefore a truly cooperative effort, and as the first female Secretary General of ICAO and an avid supporter and champion of women in aviation, I greatly look forward to what we can achieve here. For those of you who may not be aware of the sheer scope and significance of the world's air transport network, our sector today supports the employment of no fewer than 62.7 million people worldwide and generates $2.7 trillion each year in global GDP. Modern commercial aircraft move over 4.1 billion people and transport over a third of world freight by value on 37 million flights each year. And this is in addition to the business aviation, adventure tourism, medical and emergency services, search and rescue, and other important social, logistical, and economic contributions which aircraft provide to civil societies every day around the world. The global connectivity achieved by those 37 million plus annual flights our network manages explains in part how international civil aviation is such a key enabler of social economic progress and international development. Another important factor in that dynamic is due to air transport being such a forward-looking industry, one which acts as an early adapter for new technologies and which constantly stimulates development, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Aviation already contributes greatly to peace, prosperity, and sustainable development all over the world. Yet, aviation can do even more for our society and especially for women. In order to accomplish this, it must first become a better example of gender equality in action. We must address head-on why women are still underrepresented in the majority of the technical and executive positions in aviation. And we must acknowledge that while the current imbalance may be a challenge for those of us already serving as professionals in this sector, it can be an opportunity for the next generations of girls now completing their studies and entering the workforce. These young people, so full of hope and promise, are making important decisions today about the careers they will pursue. This helps explain why, in 2016, the ICAO Assembly reaffirmed its commitment to the promotion of women in aviation by calling for an ICAO gender equality program. We are fortunate in the sense that the challenge of gender equality is far from unique to air transport. This explains in part why the time is now slogan rings so true for the entire world and across all sectors. This commonality of our challenge brings us tremendous opportunities to build synergies between our agencies and sectors by working across them, by sharing success stories, and by supporting each other through joint initiatives and partnerships. We are seeing this in action here today. Normally, for instance, our ICAO meetings are attended almost exclusively by representatives from the aviation sector and closely related international partners. For this Global Aviation Gender Summit, however, we have also seen sizable interest and representation from the scientific, education, labor, and research sectors. All of these perspectives will help inform and enrich the issues we explore together, leading ultimately to conclusions and recommendations for a practical way forward. This summit should therefore be seen as a key opportunity to explore the challenges and endeavors to women's advancement across a variety of technical and scientific disciplines. We will also expect it to mobilize the global air transport community, a highly specialized sector, in identifying concrete actions to accelerate gender equality in aviation. This includes identifying the partnerships we need to establish to support the effective coordination of these actions. During this summit, senior government officials and aviation industry representatives will kickstart this process through a series of panel discussions. We will also have an educational session on gender equality through the lens of unconscious bias, with the aim of raising awareness and understanding on how it can adversely impact individual and organizational decision-making. Tips and guidance will then be provided on how to involve attitudes of unconscious bias towards posture of conscious inclusion. The outcomes of these sessions will then serve as the foundation for our dialogue and reflection during the remainder of the program, where more specific gender equality barriers and endeavors relating to culture, education, and workforce will be explored. In a sense, we are aiming to change the gender equality narrative at this summit by analyzing it through both behavioral and socio-economic lenses. We expect to reach a common understanding here on what gender equality in aviation entails and the benefits it can bring, with specific focus on the importance of diversity, inclusiveness, and the positive impacts expected in terms of organizational effectiveness and successes. Our work must also align with and support the global efforts underway in achieving the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, and in particular, Sustainable Development Goals number 5 on gender. And we especially must not lose sight of the key role to be played in all of these efforts by reliable, disaggregated data on gender, whether for trend analysis, workforce planning, or related needs. The barriers and enablers we will be identifying throughout this process should be looked upon as both challenges and opportunities for the enhancement of gender equality in aviation. This includes those which relate to workplace culture, access to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM, or aviation educations, and leadership and mentoring programs. It's critical to our longer-term success that our agreed approaches seek to advocate for gender equality in aviation among both governments and the private sector air transport operators, and in each case, the need for strong commitments and leadership at the highest levels must be constantly underscored. We must also clearly identify and discuss how to break down the existing barriers to gender equality in aviation for both existing and new women professionals, whether through shared best practices, specific new programs and initiatives, or any other means which are practical and achievable. Last, but certainly not least, we must aim in gender aviation through a concrete roadmap which will accelerate progress in enhancing the participation and the representation of women in the global aviation community. This is a lot of work to be done in a short 2.5-day period, to be sure, but I'm fully convinced that all of it can be achieved. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, I will wish you all a very productive and engaging summit. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the Secretary General of ICAO for her insights, as well as some of the plans of action that the institution and organization intends to take to drive forward the acceleration of women to the forefront of the aviation industry. I think what I certainly drew from her words this morning is that there are so many interdependencies in making the world of aviation work for women. And it's critical that as we come together here today, that we face some of the hard asks, the tough areas that we need to transform and change, and begin to build a future that is both sustainable, but will also help in welcoming new entrants to this all-important industry and sector. So I look forward to more of the conversations that we are going to have over the next few days as we look at everything from mentorship to the barriers that exist, what we can do, as well as begin to define some of the new concepts and terms that we are each going to have to deal with as we take the journey around diversity and inclusivity in our workspaces forward. Next to the stage this morning, if I can please welcome, I'm going to always keep making sure I say this name right, Mr. Papa Atoumane Fang. He is the Interim Secretary General of the African Civil Aviation Commission. And the Civil Aviation Commission on the African continent does a lot of work, not just in making sure that you and I can get around with a fair amount of safety as well as practicality. And I certainly know that there are a number of challenges in getting us around the African continent today. But it's a delight, sir, and a pleasure to have you here to talk about how we entrench what it is that we are here to talk about, women specifically, not just to South Africa's borders and not just keep it to a global context, but start looking at what our 53 neighbors right the way around the continent are also doing and can still do and partner us with on this journey. Please give him a very warm round of applause as he comes to the stage.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Program Director. Allow me to recognize the Honorable Lydia Chikunga, Deputy Minister of Transport of South Africa, who delivered a very strong statement to this summit. Dr. Fang, Secretary General of ICAO, Mr. Smunda Mokoena, Interim Board Chairperson of South African Civil Aviation Authority, Professor Hubert, Gijzen, Director of UNESCO Harare Regional Office, Ms. Khoza, Director Civil Aviation, South Africa Civil Aviation Authority, members of the Council of ICAO, representatives of women in aviation, representative of Young African Aviation Professional Association, members of the media, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored and greatly privileged to address this first ever Global Aviation Gender Summit, which is being hosted by the historical city of Cape Town, South Africa. By the same token, I would like to thank the government and the people of South Africa for hosting this very important event. I also wish to thank ICAO for collaborating with the Civil Aviation Authority of South Africa and UNESCO to make this event a reality. Allow me to express my sincere thanks and appreciation for the dynamic relationship that AFCAC has benefited from the civil aviation organizations around the world, where women from all disciplines are contributing to the everyday existence of the aviation industry. In this regard, I wish to thank the government, again the government of South Africa, for their unwavering support to AFCAC by continuously seconding aviation security experts. For the past 4.5 years, AFCAC has enjoyed the support through the expertise of female aviation security experts, which has yielded excellent results not only to the benefit of AFCAC, but also to the benefit of the African continent as a whole and beyond. AFCAC has witnessed growth from strength to strength in the challenge field of aviation security and remains grateful to South Africa for the remarkable contribution. This clearly informs the summit that without some of these devoted ambassadors in the front lines of the fast-paced aviation industry, progress would not have reached its current development. It is therefore an honor and privilege to participate in the discussions as we look forward to collaborate and forge healthy partnerships both at regional and international levels in order to close the gap that currently exists in gender mainstreaming in the African continent and globally. Ladies and gentlemen, AFCAC holds the view that African member states will benefit from this worthy initiative through effective participation in the summit, followed by perpetual, robust engagement that will be streamlined to address gender imbalances within the aviation system. While we note with concern the low level of women participation in aviation from the statistic provided by ICAO, I'm pleased to inform that history in aviation has been marked by gradual increase with intent to close this gap. Just to give a recent example, on the 8th of March 2017, Malawi Airlines literally took Africa's aviation history to lofty heights when the first all-women operated flight flew from Kamusa International Airport in Lilongwe to the Tanzanian capital city of Dar es Salaam. All flight operations on that day from the cockpit, cabin, check-in, customer care, air traffic control, and ground handling were conducted by women. That is indeed commendable development. That is indeed commendable development for women in Africa. We all know, though, that this is just one of the many examples showing that women are already taking key roles in aviation. The African Civil Aviation Commission supports all initiatives that encourage greater participation of women in aviation, and as such, declare its commitment to play an active role in the following: promotion of aviation women in aviation, developing a database of all women aviators in various categories, support of the 50-50 allocation of post principals in aviation, and foster no gender left behind approach in support of ICAO gender policy and resolution A3930, among others. Ladies and gentlemen, AFCAC is committed to utilize its strategic position in Africa to promote and develop a culture of gender mainstreaming in aviation. In this regard, I wish to inform the summit that AFCAC recruitment process takes into consideration gender percentage as a way of strengthening women representation. It also boosts gender balance and recognition of women as entrenched in our manual of procedures. This has over time been evidenced by the appointment of Madam Iyabo Sosina, whose tenure ended in February this year, after serving in wonderful and remarkable manner the aviation community in Africa as Secretary General of AFCAC. I'm also pleased to inform you that AFCAC has collaborated with various governments and international organizations in providing specific aviation training for women in particular. To illustrate this, in 2018, a number of African women will benefit from the 6th UAE GCAA Women Internship Program, which is a result of partnership between AFCAC and the General Civil Aviation Authority of United Arab Emirates. AFCAC intends to take ownership of the realistic, practical, and implementable action plan as part of the conclusions and recommendation of this summit. Furthermore, AFCAC commits to implement the envisaged action plan to increase the level of women participation in the African aviation industry. That is why I wish to call upon all of us gathered today to, one, participate actively in this first ever Global Gender Summit and resolve to achieve gender balance for the sustainable development of the global aviation industry. 2, adopt the summit's action plan, and 3, collaborate for the development and successful gender balance in aviation. In conclusion, it's my wish and hope that the envisaged action plan will not only intensify the promotion of gender equality and the advancement of talented women in aviation community, but will also attract young generation into the aviation system as our future leaders. Finally, I wish successful deliberation to the summit. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you to the Interim Secretary General of the African Civil Aviation Commission. I noted as I read his profile a little bit earlier on in the week that this is a gentleman who previously headed and managed the operations of perhaps one of Africa's biggest aviation hubs. And to those of you who've needed to get into Europe and to the Americas, you'll be very familiar with Dakar, which is based in Senegal and where Mr. Atoumane hails from. Now, as we move on to the last speaker of our panel this morning, you know, one of the things that I picked up as I was preparing for the conference is that aviation doesn't fall within the SDGs. And we've looked at all the different sustainable development goals as a whole, but certainly we know that the ability of people to move, to fly, and to get to various destinations as we increase everything from globalization to competitiveness in international markets is quite key and is an important enabler in the advancement of the sustainable development goals. In 2017, ICAO mapped out how its own business plan would begin to contribute to the 15 of the 17 SDGs notwithstanding, which still means that aviation and its role within the transportation and mobility of the people of the world will still be weaved into that all-important competition, the all-important conversation, rather, that not only moves the world and its people forward, but also makes sure that for the purposes of equality, equity, and empowerment, women and girls are just as mobile and as competitive with everyone else around the globe. So, to now welcome back to the podium and to the mic, the director of the UNESCO Harare office based in Zimbabwe. I'd like to welcome to the stage Professor Hubert Gijzen, and he will tell us a little bit about UNESCO's work. UNESCO, as you have all read in your various conference collateral, is an important partner to the conversation that we are having here today. Because this is not just a conversation that centers solely on gender, but we do begin to look at the role of everything from education to science to culture, as well as how that is inbred and enabled in a society. And we know the work that UNESCO does in all of those spaces, but perhaps most importantly, in pulling together all of those spaces. Please welcome Professor Hubert Gijzen to the stage.
I don't think I need it. Dr. Fang Liu, Secretary General of ICAO, ICAO, I believe is the acronym. The Honorable Deputy Minister, who unfortunately had to rush to catch a plane, distinguished colleague speakers here at podium, Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. I believe I have some good news and some bad news. The good news is that this is the last presentation in the morning session before the coffee. The bad news is that most of the important points have been made by previous speakers and that you must be getting tired. So when I saw yesterday evening that I'm the last speaker, I decided to put some slides together. This is not a presentation, but just glossy images to accompany the key messages. I hope it will work and keep you focused. So let me say it's my great pleasure to be here with you in this beautiful city of Cape Town and to address you at this very first Gender Aviation Summit on behalf of the UNESCO Director General, Madame Audrey Azoulay. And yes, also UNESCO has a woman in the cockpit, the same as ICAO, and in fact, many other UN agencies. I believe that in this respect, indeed, the UN leads by example. But what about gender equality in governments, in parliaments, in academia, especially at the senior level, in the private sector, and what about the aviation industry? Ladies and gentlemen, gender equality is everyone's business. The overarching aim to achieve gender equality means that we need to address gender inequalities. Did you know, for instance, that 95% of the Forbes 500 CEOs are men? That 2/3 of the almost 800 million adults without basic literary skills are women? And that only 3 out of every 10 researchers in sub-Saharan Africa is a woman. Interestingly, toilets can also be an indicator of gender inequalities. Did you know, for instance, that the US Senate did not have a ladies' room until 1992? I guess that says something about who was expected to come to work. Also in the aviation industry, we see challenges. In about 95% of all flights, the announcement, "This is your captain speaking," is made by a man. In the cabin, women seem to be in the majority, but only 5 out of every 100 aviation technicians and engineers is a woman. Now, the aviation industry is one of the fastest growing sectors globally. And predictions are that world air travel will almost double over the next 15 years. This rapid growth is reason for optimism, certainly, but also for concerns, as it happens at a time when the world has embarked on a massive transformational change process as captured in the Agenda 2030. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2030 Agenda and its 17 SDGs represent the most ambitious and comprehensive commitment that the international community has ever made to achieve 3 extraordinary things by the year 2030. First, to end extreme poverty. Second, to fight inequalities and injustice. And third, to protect our planet. The successful implementation of the agenda requires a dramatic shift in our thinking about development and about a viable future for both the planet and for people. It requires collective action and responsibility from all actors, also from the aviation industry. This presents both a challenge, but also opportunities for the aviation industry to manage the rapid growth of the sector and at the same time to contribute to the global SDGs by, first, ensuring that the growth is environmentally sustainable via, amongst others, via aviation carbon dioxide reduction, and contributing to a transition towards a green economy. And this calls, of course, for a strong role for science, technology, and innovation. And second, ensuring that this growth contributes also to economic growth, to employment generation, and well-being for all, equally for men and women. This calls for gender equality, also in the aviation industry. This dual challenge is an interconnected one, and the interconnection is eloquently captured in the slogan used by the UNESCO L'Oréal for Women in Science program, which states that the world needs science, science needs women. Indeed, the implementation of the SDGs need more scientists and more engineers. How is that transformation going to be accomplished without innovation, without science, without engineering? But the irony is that we continue to see a decline in university intake numbers in the sciences and engineering, with even fewer girls and young women. Ladies and gentlemen, the UNESCO Science Report, published in the year 2015, observes an alarming, what we call leaking pipe effect, with the engagement of women dropping from about 53% at the BSc and MSc levels to 43% at PhD level, and further down to only 28% of female researchers. For engineering disciplines, these figures are actually even lower. In Europe and North America, for instance, the percentage of female engineer graduates are as low as around 19%. Also, TVET, Technical Vocational Education and Training, the enrollment rates are very low, particularly, again, for girls and young women. The issue of low intake rates and the importance of STEM, the science education, especially for girls, has been recognized already for decades. But the trends are continuing. So how do we turn the tide? Let me give some suggestions. Firstly, we need to urgently reflect on how science is being brought to the classroom. The global ESD, that is the Education for Sustainable Development program, offers new opportunities for science education at all ages. And this can be done via hands-on, joyful learning approaches where creative thinking and problem solving becomes fun. Secondly, we need to focus on reaching out to young women and girls with knowledge and information about engineering and science so that they can make informed decisions on their paths of study and their careers. And third and last, we need to work on perceptions and stereotyping and remove the persistent gender bias in technology and also in the use of devices for girls and boys. And then what do we do about this? What are the actions? A few examples. UNESCO and Airbus have recently partnered for the Fly Your Ideas competition that started in 2012. Now, this competition has inspired over 20,000 students from over 100 countries to cover key 21st century challenges for a greener aviation industry. The program has also been successful in attracting more young women participating in the competition. Another good example is the recently launched 1 Million Girls in STEM campaign, where UNESCO partners with WOMENG, an NGO, and the goal is to impact 1 million girls through STEM education around the world with a strong emphasis on Africa. And I'm very pleased to see here in the back of the room 50 young girls participating in this program. They are wearing the pink hard hats. Ladies, can you please stand up? Give them a big applause. So these are our future engineers and our future leaders, also for the aviation industry. Now, in taking all these initiatives forward, we must also be innovative in the way we communicate and the way we reach out to young women and girls. In closing, therefore, let me share with you an example of innovative communication, and this comes from a TVET program that we implement in Malawi in collaboration with the European Union and the Ministry of Manpower. And this program on TVET focuses on the construction sector. And we have taken on board in this project the objective to increase the number of young women and girls in this male-dominated sector. So let's have a look. And this is just to break the boreness. It is a song. And it starts with a poem, very briefly, and then the song kicks in. Look at the lyrics. There's very strong lyrics in this.
Monga bololo osamva matope agwera nawo matope nkuluka osapakika ngati nankafumbwe okhala sabata atunthu asana adye pachimanga ayika kuchitsakano imeneyi mwansangala agwira yooneka achimunayi ntchito mopanda phuma ife omudziwa tikudziwa ndi olimba mtima ndi odekha ameneyu n'chifukwa chake pomunyadira kuti nyadu timamutcha mayi ngwazi yachikazi
ati ndine wankazi sindingagwira ntchito zina ayi oti ndine wankazi ine panga ndipa nyumba basi nditokhala chilichonse ndingafune lelo nditogwira ntchito yomwe ndingafune lelo I am a soldier, plumber, even a pilot too. Nditogwira ntchito yomwe ndingafune mechanics, even carpenter too. Do you know we have politicians, electricians, we say one does in my too. In the mind in ngwazi osadziya manira pansi nditakugwira ntchito yomwe ndifuna ine mind in ngwazi yachikazi osadziya manira pansi ndiwambiri pondiyang'ana kundiderera ndikundinyozetsa ndawi zina kundikomerera ati ntchito yanga sindikwanitsa ati simbali yanga ndikhalani pansi muone ngwazi ya chikazi.
So the language is in Chichewa, and we're thinking about producing an English version as well. And the lady singer is a famous singer in Malawi, but now she has become a star. And the reason is that the success, the results of this production were really amazing. The video became the hottest item on social media in Malawi, and the song ranked #1 in the charts in Malawi for several months. And also earlier this year, in March, the song won the prestigious European Union Communications Award. So that is really an interesting achievement, but it shows what we can learn from this EU UNESCO project in Malawi, where stereotyping of male dominance in Tibet is now changing. Ladies and gentlemen, UNESCO is very proud to cooperate with ICAO on the first Gender Aviation Summit, and we hope that together we can play many more new initiatives that will contribute to the dual objective I mentioned earlier, namely to ensure a transition to a sustainable and a gender-balanced aviation industry in the near future. I end by saying to all of you here present, please join us in making this happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you very much to the Regional Director of UNESCO in this region, Professor Gijzen, for his words as well as that presentation. You know, as he moved the podium step, it made me think of something. They say equality is giving everybody the same thing. But if you and I were standing back at the podium and you on your feet and me on the step, that, sir, is equity. And that's treating and giving everybody fairness in every situation. And it's also part of the reason why I don't stand behind the lectern, because as you can all see, even in heels, I'm about the size of the lectern. So, ladies and gentlemen, certainly one of the overriding themes that we have received this morning from the presentations and the words that we've received from my panel of guests behind me is just how important this conversation is, not just in our current context, but also for future generations to come. The status quo cannot remain the same, and each of us have the power and the capacity as it currently stands, to begin to implement various initiatives and actions in the organizations and spaces we find ourselves in, to begin to change the course of not just the aviation sector, but also the course of history as we have come to know it in the skies. One of my other favorite quotes is that if wealth was the inevitable result of hard work and enterprise, every woman would be a millionaire. And what we are distinctly saying is that it's going to take more than hard work or the enterprise of women, but it's also going to be about creating spaces and access, bringing down walls and barriers, and making sure that we sustainably support women, not just into the aviation industry and its various spaces, but making sure that women stay in those spaces and enable others to follow them. Thank you very much to the panel of speakers behind me from around the continent as well around the world for giving us their insights, as well as some of the commitments that the various institutions they represent this morning have already made to the issue of gender transformation in the aviation industry. I'd also like to thank our Deputy Minister in absentia. She has left us to go join an executive committee meeting, but we are advised that she will be joining us again tomorrow as well as on Friday to hear out some of the thoughts that our great panels will share with us. We are now going to break for tea. We are going to have a shorter than scheduled tea break, and if I can ask everybody to take a leg stretch, grab their refreshments, and be back in the room within the next 10 to 15 minutes, we will make sure that our hostesses call you back, and then we will kick off with our very first panel of the day. If I can ask for everybody's cooperation, just in terms of our returns to the room, I would greatly appreciate that, because I'd love to make up our time again by the time we hit lunchtime today. Enjoy your break, and we'll see you back in the room shortly. Thank you.